Hey travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call, because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820. Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No, no one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Good evening, Johnson County. Welcome to this week's episode of the Texas Transparency Project, and I'm your host, Greg Cooper. And here on the Texas Transparency Project, we deep dive local politics, mainly school boards and city councils, but any and all Johnson County politics are on the table. We air most Thursdays at 5 p.m. You can visit the JoCo Community Radio Facebook page to watch shows live or to see replays. Also, you can go to www.JoCo Community Radio, where Apple and Android apps are available. Tune in to get the ins and outs of Johnson County, Texas. Tonight on the Texas Transparency Project, we're going to be staying right where we've been the last few weeks. With the March 5th primary election here in Johnson County looming, we've hosted a slew of guests running for this primary election, and we will be hosting more between tonight's guest and the election, which is March 5th. This week, we host a candidate for district attorney, Timothy Good. He's been here before. And to revisit what district attorneys and county attorneys do, the main duty of both the county attorney and the district attorney is to represent the state in criminal cases. They both work with law enforcement officers in the investigation and the preparation of cases to be heard before the criminal courts. Typically, the county attorney represents the state in misdemeanor or less serious criminal cases, and the district attorney represents the state in felony or more serious cases. These public prosecutors determine whether prosecution in any given case should move forward, and if so, pushed to a successful conclusion. As with all elected county officials, the district attorney has the ultimate authority over the operations of the office, including the authority to hire, fire, and direct all the daily activities of the office. The district attorney also has the authority to determine how to use all the resources in the office and helps work the budget through the budget process. So your tax dollars are used wisely in the enforcement and the prosecution of crimes in Johnson County and Somerville County. Tonight, here in the Texas Transparency Project, we're discussing the Johnson County District Attorney's Office, or more commonly referred to as the DA's office. And so again, Texas district attorneys are felony prosecutors. So these are the more serious offenses, and they're empowered to gather criminal evidence and present cases to trial if there are grounds for prosecution. For the first time in a long time, residents of Johnson County will have a choice. The Honorable Dale Hanna, he is the current district attorney. He's gone unchallenged for 24 years, and for all intents and purposes, has done a fair job. But a very fair question is it time for a change? Is new blood needed in the DA's office? You can learn more about the current Johnson County District Attorney, Mr. Dale Hanna, at the county's website. It is www.johnsoncountytexas.org. We've hosted Mr. Dale Hanna in previous episode of the Texas Transparency Project, and he's invited back if he so chooses anytime he wishes. And tonight, for the second time, we host the challenger to Mr. Hanna's seat. He's a Christian, he's a husband, he's a father, and a conservative Republican. I reintroduce Mr. Timothy Good. He's the first one in many, many years to challenge Mr. Hanna, as we stated previously. He's accepted an invite here tonight to talk about his platform, his goals, and his reasons for asking for your vote. Mr. Good, welcome back to the Texas Transparency Project, and tell us a little bit about your background and briefly why you want to run for the Johnson County District Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Greg, for having me on. Briefly, my background, I've actually worked for that office for the past 7 years, been a prosecutor for over 10 years. And the reason why I think people should care about the District Attorney's Office or DA's race, a lot of people I talk to during this campaign say, well, I'm not a criminal, so why do I care? It's never going to affect me. And that's actually not true. The DA's office does set the tone. And Mr. Hannon will say the same thing. Sets the tone for felony prosecution within the county. So how lenient a county is on crime or how harsh they are on crime, that is directly related to what the DA sets as the tone. Also, as we've seen across the country, this office is very powerful and it can be very easily abused. And so in that sense, and we've seen political prosecutions. A great example right now that's going on is Dallas County has voter fraud issues that the DA is not taking up. And so you have like Ken Paxton, our attorney general, says, I want to take up these cases and prosecute the voter fraud. And the Court of Criminal Appeals has said, no, you can't. Only the DA has the authority to prosecute that crime. And so that thus far basically makes that legal in Dallas County.
So is it fair to say that the DA's office, at least for the more serious crimes, felonies, it effectively is a bottleneck, and it has a substantial amount of latitude in whether or not things move forward or not? Is that what we're trying to say?
Absolutely. So any case that comes to the DA's office, there's no requirement the DA take the case. So if a case is filed by law enforcement, you could have everything worked up. It could be by the Texas Rangers, and they can file with the DA's office. It's up to the DA, whoever he or she is, to say, I'm going to accept that case and prosecute it, or they can say, no, I don't want it, and just reject it. There's nobody else that can step in the place of the DA and prosecute a crime.
So it's fair to say that everybody, and I think you hit on this a little bit earlier, and you kind of stole my first big question, but it's fair to say that everybody, whether you commit crimes or not, whether you plan on committing crimes, you potentially can be an unwitting victim of a crime. So
Yes.
you definitely have to be aware of and have a say in who the district attorney is to make sure that they're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Is that fair to say?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it could be anything as simple as someone's broken into your vehicle and stolen stuff, setting the tone, particularly like think places like Travis County or Harris County. There are people down there that'll tell you they call, report a crime. The police maybe come and investigate, maybe don't. But if they ever get the case down, the DA's office dies. Nothing happens. And so being a victim of crime is something so small as that. You're just left there with like there's no law. There's literally no law enforcement. Going up to higher levels, if you or your family member gets victimized of sexual assault or a manslaughter case where you get killed by a drunk driver or murdered, that also the DA sets the tone for that and decides. So there could be in a situation no justice for an individual just because the DA says we're not doing anything with that case.
Fair enough. So definitely, if you're out there thinking about voting in this March 5th primary, really take a good look at these DA candidates and really determine whether or not one can do the job better than the other. Before we move on to begin our questioning of Mr. Good here, I want to encourage everybody, if you have questions for Mr. Good after the break, if you put them in the Facebook chat, we're going to take some questions, and you can also call in. Please don't call until the second half of the show. The phone number is 817-637-2585. That is 817-637-2585, and we'll take questions after the break. So, Mr. Good, your opponent, Mr. Hanna, he's placed a lot of emphasis. I've been to numerous events, Q&As, the Republican County women's groups, Lone Star Patriot groups, and different events. And he continually harps on his experience as a major factor on why he should get everyone's votes. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and whether or not that's overrated and how the average voter should factor experience into this decision?
I think it's a great question. So my experience, like I said, I've been a prosecutor for over 10 years, over a decade. I have tried 5 murder cases, all to guilty verdicts. I have participated in 15 murder investigations. I've tried cases of juries all throughout that period of time of 10 years. That's important, I think, to be trying cases. Mr. Hanna has been in office for a long time. I don't think he's tried a case in the past 10 or 15 years. So there's that aspect. As you mentioned, he's on board certified. He is as well. Board certification, most people don't understand what that is. So everybody knows that a lawyer has to take a bar exam to get licensed to practice in their state. So everybody that's a lawyer has taken a bar exam and they've been licensed by the state of Texas. After that, you can take a second bar exam, which is called a board certification. Now, you can't just go do that immediately. You have a certain number of time of years of doing something, so many jury trials, so many appeals to get to the next level where you're actually qualified to sit for that exam. And then once you sit for that exam, if you pass, you become board certified. And so out of the 120,000 attorneys in the state of Texas, less than 1% are board certified in any field in particular. For criminal law, I think it's only 785 attorneys are actually licensed currently in Texas for that position. So he and I are both board certified. But I think that shows further the experience I have as well. But to get to that top tier 1%, he at this point, he has years, and I think he's got a few capital cases that I don't have experience in. I was working on a capital case right before I got let go from the office. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at this point, I look at it as more time that he has in office, more time as an attorney. If we shift over to the medical field, if you talk to most medical professionals, they'll tell you the best sweet spot for a doctor is usually about the 7 to 10 year mark after getting out of med school and residency. And that's because as you stay in a profession for a long period of time, you get complacent. And so I think that's a question voters need to ask themselves is, has Mr. Hanna become complacent in his role? I say you have a plumber for 25 years. In those 25 years, you don't just change him because you go, oh, I've had you for too long. You only change them when they're not keeping up with the current trends. So if your plumber is still using lead pipes and not PVC pipes, then you say, okay, look, I need to find somebody that's up to speed on the current technology, what's happening. And that's one of my chief complaints about the office. We are not staying up current with the current technology or, frankly, some of the current law.
So we're going to get into that. So every attorney has to pass a bar to practice law, correct?
Correct.
And that's like, you could consider that like junior varsity or JV. And then varsity level or professional level would be the board certification. Is that the highest level of certification for criminal law that there is?
It is.
Okay. So you're on par with Mr. Hanna regarding that type of certification.
Credentials, yes.
Credentialing.
Mhm.
When did you take that credential? When did he take that credential? And how recent is that? And how applicable to modern day law is that?
So I took my exam in 2021. Then the results and then certification was finalized in 2022. He took his, I believe, in 1985. And so I think that's important to note. So the last time that he was ever proved proficiency at law was back in 85.
So what type of certifications are revisiting of the law takes place between that board certification to stay current?
So to keep the board certification, simply you have to certify that you still practice 25% your current specialty field, and you have to give like 5 references that can verify that you still practice in that field. But there's no further testing. There's
no proficiency testing.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And your proficiency testing was certified in 2022, so fairly recent.
Correct.
Okay. Your opponent, Mr. Hanna, he stated numerous times that under his leadership, criminals avoid Johnson County. This has been said numerous times at many events, that Johnson County is so hard on crime and that sentencing is so severe and so stringent that criminals like the Black Plague avoid Johnson County.
Right.
What would you say that your experience in the DA's office and in Johnson County has been in regards to that?
Okay. So I think that used to be true back in the 90s. There used to be that talking point, and there used to be the kind of mentality. I also don't like that currently, that kind of talk, because it's political pandering is what it is. It's talking about this outside force of evil that's coming in our community and someone's keeping it back. It's not internal problems we have in our community. We're not working on our community issues. I mean, crime happens between our own citizens. But to be a politician, it really sounds nice for me to say, there's an evil force out there. It lurks in Dallas or in Tarrant County, and it's coming here. And we got to build that wall up, that deterrence that makes them not want to come here. Crime is here. People are naturally fallen individuals. We commit crimes. We hurt each other. And so I'm not a big fan of the political pandering trying to say there's an external force. We need to also realize there's internal problems we have here that need to be addressed.
So that's a very valid point. And especially with the growth that Johnson County's experienced, it's doubled fairly recently, and it has massive amounts of growth coming. So crime is going to move here. So you can't just look at it as keeping it out. You have to address with what's here. So I agree with you there. You recently worked for the Johnson County District Attorney's Office. You worked for Mr. Hanna up until a recent time. What happened, and why are you no longer working for the District Attorney's Office?
Okay. So the reason for the separation, and so I decided back in July, me and my wife had a conversation, decided that something needed to change. And so going forward, we got ready to run, and we actually filed kind of last minute into that because I had a feeling that when I filed, I was going to get terminated. So I filed on Friday, I believe it was December 8th. I have to correct on a previous radio show. I said I came in on the 13th and got fired. It was actually the 11th. So it was filed on Friday afternoon. On Monday, I walked in. He met me at the door, told me that, I need to quit. And I said, I don't have any plans to quit. I explained to him that, I have no intent to undermine him while I'm working there. When I'm working there, I'm working for him. I'm not trying to use the office as a political tool to, stab him in the back or anything like that. And he said, well, that's the way the wind's blowing. So we're going to have an HR meeting in 5 minutes. So 5 minutes later, I show up to the HR meeting. I sit down. My hands are empty. I don't have the letter I'm supposed to have. And he asked, where's my letter? And I said, I don't intend to quit. And I was terminated on the spot.
So you decided to exercise your right to run for political office, and then you were terminated as an attorney for the District Attorney's Office.
Correct.
So I'm going to make the assumption here that just knowing what I've never been subject of a criminal case or anything like that. I've participated in some in the law enforcement aspect, but I don't really understand the work and the length of time that an attorney puts into prosecuting a case from start to finish. I'm going to make the assumption that you were on numerous cases when this happened.
Yes.
What happens, and how does that continuity fall off? Like what transpires? Because it seems, I mean, unless, because there was no cause, there was no malpractice, there was nothing negative other than you were running for his seat.
Right.
So and you, by all intents and purposes, you're an elite lawyer based on your bar certification. Doesn't it hurt the ability for the county to potentially prosecute crimes when there's no continuity and lawyers are shifting? Can you walk us through that piece and what ball was potentially dropped during that type of process?
Right. Of course, in my answer is gonna be biased because it affects me. But absolutely, when you have attorneys working on some cases you can work up and get ready in 2 to 3 weeks. Other cases you're working on for a year. We're working on a bunch of other cases. So at this time, I and another attorney were on the capital murder cases. Actually, they're doing jury selection currently right now. So we had been working that case over about 2 years. And so that, with me getting separated from that case, I'm sure that's going to have some kind of effect. I know the attorneys who are going to be trying it. I think they're fantastic attorneys, and I think they can pull it off. It's regrettable they're in that situation to play scramble, because after I get terminated, they get assigned to a case to get it ready in 2 months versus the 2 years that I had to work through that case.
So, in a perfect world, you would have solved those cases to fruition,
Yes.
and that would have been better continuity. So, hopefully, those cases will turn out with positive outcomes and justice will be served. And it's good to know that there's current good attorneys still there.
I think so.
Were there any other than that capital murder case? Was there more cases that were harmed by that, or would you say that was the only one?
That was the biggest case I was working. I was also working a bunch of side intake cases and things like that. With the homicide we were looking at. So there's always a bunch of cases you're working. That was the primary case that my daily duties were assigned to do. So for 2 years, that's what I'm doing. But there's a bunch of other side cases, and I try to do my best to kind of leave notes, because I had a feeling this was coming. So that those cases that I was working on, there was notes in all those files. So whoever gets them is not left in the dark. Because ultimately, I mean, it's the victim of those cases, right? I've been talking to them. I've been trying to get things worked out. I've been talking to other law enforcement entities. So I didn't want to have that just completely disappear and drop, because that is the most frustrating thing, I'll tell you. Anytime I talk to a victim and she says, my detective has quit the agency, has gone somewhere else, now my case is stalled out, and then trying to work with them to get that restarted. I didn't want to have that happen with my cases and have me be the reason those things fell through.
That's good, and hopefully those will have good outcomes. And I can't stand when ego affects that. Hopefully that's not what it was. Hopefully there, whatever reason. But the bottom line is any type of civil service, we need quality people to serve in those positions. And hopefully all those will turn out good. So reviewing your website, what is your website, and how can individual voters go to learn about you and about your platform, and to get involved with your campaign if they so feel the need to?
Right. So the website is goodforda.com. You can spell it any way you want to, and they're all going to link to the same website. That's the best place to go. So that's my static website. I have a lot of information about myself, a lot of Q&A. I do the Q&A section particularly because I've been voting since I was 18, and I get so frustrated getting on websites of candidates or getting flyers, and it's buzzwords. I'm conservative or tough on crime, and no one explains that. They just hope you take that, swallow it, move on. And I wanted to give my positions on a lot of issues so that voters can say either they agree with me and I get their vote, or they don't, but at least they're informed. I didn't want me to be part of the problem of having uninformed voters, because politicians help play into that. Politicians don't want to inform people, because the more nebulous they can be, the more likely they can get you to feel like, I think we're aligned, so I should vote for you.
So you're more than like a hope and change kind of guy.
Exactly.
more than Classy's slogan. So we're about 7 minutes away from our break here, and we want to take some questions for Mr. Good. Anybody that happens to be on Facebook, if you want to put questions into the chat, we will answer those questions coming back from the break. Nothing's off limits, correct, Mr. Good?
Correct.
So anything that anybody wants to know, you can't talk about any specific cases. I'm going to make that assumption.
Correct.
But anything that anybody wants to ask for Mr. Good, we'll take those questions after the break. So talking about your website, and it's good for DA, the number, or FORDA. You talk about some things here. First, one of the main things that you're talking about is you will serve both counties. Now, so you're running for DA for Somerville and Johnson County.
That's
This
correct.
is a Johnson County show, but those in Somerville County will also get the services of you or Mr. Hanna.
Correct.
And you feel it's important to state that you will treat them as equal, and you will not favor any city or people group over another. No citizen is above the law or below its protection. Why did you feel the need to put such a
Right.
statement like that in there about favoritism and stuff like that?
Because I think the opposite is what's happening currently. I think that's kind of obvious by my statement, but if we start with the counties, I feel like Somerville County has been mistreated, kind of the redheaded stepchild. It has not been paid attention to. They don't have assigned prosecutors to them. We just have that county as kind of a problem, I guess, is the way we kind of view it, is the office. We're not serving them. We're not going down there trying cases. We're not being hard on crime down there. It's just like it's an extra duty that you have to do, like take out the trash or something. I want to see that change. If we're going to have two counties that one office represents, you need to represent both of those counties fully. So I would like to see, and it depends on what kind of staffing I can get. I would love to see a assistant actually assigned that goes down there and sits. We don't have someone that goes down to Somerville County and is at the courthouse to meet with the sheriff's office or the police officers down there in Somerville. We just go down there once a month when we have docket, and that's it. I think that needs to change.
So, what determines who gets assigned down there now? Is it just random? Is it just whoever has the lowest case count or anything like that? Because here again, we've talked about continuity a little bit. That's pretty important. So in a Timothy Good administration, you would assign dedicated people to work down there.
Correct.
Is that what your goal would be?
Currently, all we do is so they have docket down there once a month. Docket is basically court. And so some of the people from the district attorney's office pile into a car and drive down there for an hour or two. They finish docket up and come back. So there's not really anybody assigned down. There's just kind of who has time to fill in this or that. And we, go down there, address it, but they're having that dedication to them.
Now, I'm not a native Texan. Since 2015, I retired out of the military out of Washington. I've lived in Oklahoma, Midlothian, Texas, 2 places in Colorado, Godley, Texas, and Joshua, Texas. And I don't know what it is about here, but one, I've experienced it and lived it, the good old boy system that people refer to. And you literally begin moving in to hear about the good old boy system.
Yeah.
How would Timothy Good administration kind of circumvent and get around at least the perception of, or this ingrained good old boy system? How can you navigate some of those long, these are long established personalities that are used to things being done a certain way. Right. How can you navigate that kind of complex issues?
Okay. So we won't call it a perception. We'll call it reality. And the way to get around that simply is you cannot feed into that system. The district attorney's office should not have a back door where certain connected people get to come in and talk or have their cases heard differently or get special favors. Justice, I know it's idealistic. It's supposed to be blind, but we have ideas for a reason, right? Those are principles the North Star we try to get to. And so this idea of the good old boy system, it needs to die. It just simply, and not just the idea of it, but the practice of it. So that's why I say every person should be treated equally. I don't care if you are the bum that sleeps under the bridge or you're a mayor of a city. The same law applies to both, and it should be driven by the facts. Too often I've seen cases where it's who you are or who you know determine your outcome for you. Versus if you don't know anybody, if you're not connected, then you just get you get what you had coming, quote unquote. But that's not the way to do prosecution. Prosecution can't be driven by that because you can't do favors for people and call it justice.
Well, then Lady Justice is blind for a reason. And, there's a lot of ambiguity-ness in this world. And we should all be able to rely on the law being administered uniformly and equally across the board.
We should.
I'm fortunate enough; I've never really had a negative benefits into that. But having lived all over, being in the military, something about this area, you hear about these kind of problems more than anywhere else. And you can say that you definitely saw that while you were there.
Absolutely.
And how hard do you think it would be to change that? Is there other personalities that, would the ship right itself with the right captain, or how do you navigate that?
That's a great question. There are definitely more personalities involved. A big key link in that, the cornerstone, I think, is the district attorney's office. So you can't get a lot of those favors without having the district attorney involved in it. That's where it ultimately comes, down to. And I think other people follow along with that favor system because they're not at the top of the food chain. So when there's somebody out in the community that is being accused of a crime, if the district attorney steps in and says, you're not allowed to investigate that person, it stops there. So you have law enforcement go, what are we supposed to do? I think if you don't have that happen anymore, you're still going to have, and there's still going to be problems with other prominent individuals who are participating. A lot of people are mad that I'm running because of this. But I think that's like I said, the cornerstone. If it's taken out, I think a lot of the good old boy systems can start collapsing.
And I really hope that problem can solve itself. The perception is horrible, and you hear all the time, well, why don't the Texas Rangers get involved? Why doesn't this person get involved? Why doesn't that person get involved? And the way I understand it is, yes, they can get involved, but it requires the DA to request that intervention. Is that
yes?
Is that
so? My understanding.
Explain that and walk us through that before our break here.
So, the average citizen or law enforcement cannot contact the Texas Rangers, the limited resource, and get them involved. The person that can is your district attorney, I believe, also your state rep. So if neither one of those two people want to have them come in and look at what's happening in their own backyard, it's off limits.
Right on. We'll be back. The Texas Transparency Project, DA candidate Tim Good, after the break.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Welcome back to the Texas Transparency Project. We're here with District Attorney candidate Timothy Good. And before we get to our second segment and some questions here in the chat, I want to remind everybody that Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoco.com, that's TuneInJoco.com, is the place to find all the ways to listen and watch. And the station app is also available for free on Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more at www.jococommunityradio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep at 844-TEX-HAIL. That's 844-TEX-HAIL. 844-839-4245. And be sure to dress your arms and more at the tiffy.com for some of this cooler weather. And before we get to the questions here, we talked a little bit about why you decided to run. And there's a recent case going on right now in Johnson County and for Burleson. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? This is and this is one of the reasons you wanted to run. So why does somebody have political ambitions to be the the leader of a massive ship that sets course on a path. And we're going to talk about the Burleson bomb maker. He was recently sentenced to 14 years. What did this Burleson case with this bomb maker? How did this transpire that gave you the itch to run for district attorney in Johnson County and Somerville County?
Okay, I don't know if it's so much an itch. It was that kind of pit in my stomach feel that something needed to change. So to back up, I do a lot of work with law enforcement. I try to be available to law enforcement in Johnson County, outside of Johnson County. I've done a lot of work with the troopers. So my name and my numbers out there for a lot of people. So how this all starts is, I think it's back in June or July of last year. I get a call from the FBI, and how that backstory apparently was that they said they had this guy they're investigating, Noah Calderon, who's going to, we will later find out, is going to be this about would-be school shooter, the next Uvalde in Burleson. And they said, we need to contact down in Johnson County. And somebody says, I know Tim Good down there. I have his phone number. So that's how they end up calling me. And so I get this call, and the FBI briefs me the situation. They say they've got a individual they've been investigating for a year or so. He's had a lot of online presence. He's really hyper focused on Columbine. He's been researching down to granular level, like what.
So Columbine was a very, very prominent school shooting in Colorado.
Yeah,
so
the basic
for those that
school
don't know,
shooting, yeah,
it's the one that basically set everyone on the path that what we know now, and it's been replicated, unfortunately.
Yes.
Okay,
so he's a huge fan of that. So he's researching them, their clothing. He starts buying clothing that matches their brands. He's posting a lot of stuff online. Well, then it kicks off. He blows up a pipe bomb inside Burleson, Texas. So Burleson only knows that there are about 20-something, 30-something calls about an explosion at night in this field in Burleson. So Burleson goes out. They can't find anything, but the ATF is brought in. So they go and they find the detonation site, but they also find that there's in a pool of water an undetonated device. And so they have this device. Now, here comes the issue is it's a pipe bomb, but it's more of a test pipe bomb made of reinforced cardboard. So it doesn't frag. It doesn't create fragmentation. Under federal law, there has to be fragmentation for it to be a bomb. In Texas, any kind of device that makes a loud report that's alarming to the general community is a bomb or explosive device under Texas law. So that's why the FBI was calling to talk to me, saying we need, on a state level, we can't get a search warrant federally because it doesn't meet a federal definition of what we found. But on state side, it does. I'm like, absolutely, it does.
So just to capture all this, the Federal Bureau of Investigations has been investigating somebody for over a year. They feel that they need to take action on this.
Yes.
It doesn't meet the threshold of a federal crime. So they reach out to you working for Johnson County District Attorney's Office to help them action this case. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, all the detail I'm giving you about his involvement and fascination with Columbine, the devices, finding one that's been detonated, one that hasn't, all this information. So I go brief, our elected district attorney, Mr. Hannon. I say, this is all the stuff going on and we need to get involved. And this is where that pit in my stomach comes in, as he says, we're not getting involved in this case. And it was me and another attorney in the room, and why not? And he kept focusing on, we don't need this, another case. We don't need this. He kept repeating, this is a kid that probably likes souped up fireworks. We just don't need to get involved. This is a nothing deal. And if we get involved, the federal government's going to drop this in our lap, and they're going to make us prosecute the case if it turns out to be something. So don't get involved. But the feds feel so strongly about that, let them do something, but we're not going to do something about it. And so I left that meeting, and that's where the pit of the stomach thing just got me. I was like, I have 2 young kids. I'm fully aware of the national media coverage of the school shootings. And all the stuff that I was told from that briefing from the FBI that I expressed to my then boss, something needs to happen. I don't care who gets stuck with the case. I don't care what needs to happen. You have somebody that's clearly manifested an intent to do something. Other things that it was disclosed in the briefing were he was researching what time do schools get out in the area? What's the closest school to my house? What's the highest point within Johnson County, like for trajectory of sniper shooting, things like that. He'd purchased 3 AR-15s. All this information had been disclosed in that meeting. And Mr. Hannon was adamant, we are not going to get involved. So I left the meeting, and I decided, well, we are going to get involved. And I don't think to this day he knows that I did this, but I called the FBI back and said, I know a district court judge, we can get that warrant in front of, let's get the warrant drafted. They drafted the warrant, we reviewed it, and then it was submitted to a judge. It was signed. They wouldn't hit the house, meaning they executed a warrant on the house. And they find everything. They find, I think there's between 10 to 15 actual pipe bombs with shrapnel. They found child pornography. They find a manifesto of his intent to go shoot up schools. And so this was a live action threat that if it was just left up to your district attorney, nothing would have happened.
And for those keeping score, this individual was just sentenced to how many years? 14 years?
14 years in federal.
So
court.
so this there actually was enough to prosecute.
Yes.
There was enough to send somebody to jail, and most likely there was enough to save kids' lives.
Yes.
So thank you for working that. Having kids in school too. I can't imagine what would go into that, but not erring on the overwhelming side of caution.
Mhm.
It just boggles my mind. So thank you for circumventing the normal avenues and getting that actioned. We really appreciate it. And Johnson County owes you a debt of gratitude.
Before we get to the question, I want to tell you why that's so important, though. So the thing that people in Johnson County don't know is that all the warrants do go through the DA's office to be reviewed, basically to make sure they're probable cause and things like that. But that system has changed. We've been doing that for probably the past 10 years. The system has changed where now warrants go through the DA's office. And if the DA doesn't like him, he tells the officer, you can't get a warrant. So he plays judge before the warrants even go to a judge. And so that's why I was so concerned, realizing so the feds, they still have the ability maybe to go do something somewhere else. But if that had been the sheriff's office or Burleson PD, and Mr. Hanna said, we're not going to do anything on that, it stops there. And that was the pit of my stomach, realizing that we are controlling investigations into serious individuals, serious crimes based off somebody going, it's just an over souped up firework, or it's a kid that's fascinated with blowing stuff up. It's not a big thing. And really that process should never be happening. I'm firmly against the idea that a warrant goes to the district attorney's office and can be killed there. And that's happening. And no one knows that, but warrants are being presented by all the agencies. And if the district attorney doesn't like the case or knows the person involved, the case dies there.
That's too bad. And again, thank you. And Johnson County owes you a debt of gratitude. And, most likely some schools do and some parents do too. So thank you for that. And any prosecutors out there, hopefully you have the intestinal fortitude to do what's right. And keep politics out of it. So we're going to get to some questions now.
Sure.
We got quite a few. And the first one, the question is, being a victim of the DA's office under Hannah's leadership, I beg you to please do the due diligence and vote accordingly. I stand with Tim Good. He stands for doing things fair, justice, and with transparency and leadership of a man that's not afraid to admit he's wrong or doesn't know something. He will find the solution and conquer the problem. Tim Good for Johnson County District Attorney. That was an overwhelmingly endorsement.
It was
from a former city councilwoman. So I thought I'd throw that in there before we get to some questions.
Okay.
So let's see here. So does Hannah use a computer? And there's rumors about him not being technologically savvy. So can you talk about the technology piece here?
So it's been a well-known thing the whole time I was there 7 years. He has never used a computer, to my knowledge. I don't know if he can. I know there's always been a computer in a box in the corner of his office, but it's never been on a desk, never plugged in. So he does not utilize technology. Now, throughout this campaign, there's been some misunderstanding. The ADAs have computers. The assistant paralegals, they have computers. We have technology in the office. It's just Mr. Hanna has decided himself that as the world has grown on and gone past where we use all those tools, he's decided he doesn't need to. I've heard him even say, I don't need to because I have these 3 girls that do that for me. So I can say, hey, you look this up, you look this up. But when it comes down, he can't do it himself. He just does not use technology, which that's not my huge complaint with him. My huge complaint is when we come asking for more technological upgrades, saying we need these additional tools, he doesn't see the need for it. If you rode a horse and that was your transportation, I was trying to explain why we need a car, and you're like, I don't know why we need a car. Horses get it all done. You're never going to get that extra thing you need because we all know cars are way more efficient than horses. And that's the situation I have. It's like talking a foreign language to him. Instead of just saying, you guys got this, you guys, that's your thing. If you guys say we need it, we're going to get it. He just says, no, we don't need to have that.
What type of efficiency or productivity increases would you expect with a technologically cutting edge district attorney's office in Johnson and Somerville County?
Well, I mean, for starts, if I'm the elected district attorney, I can use a computer. So that means those 3 individuals in the office, they have to be his computer for him. they can do other tasks. That's 3 people that get their jobs back to do other things. As well as, I mean, I've talked about before, the electronic filing of cases tremendously is going to make law enforcement more efficient because they're not wasting time driving actually physically to our office to file and then back. Also, when we need a supplement, a lot of times you get a case file and there's just going to be something missing. You're going to be reading through and you go, okay, I don't have a supplement from so-and-so. I don't have the body cam from this officer. When you need that, you have to call the agency, and it takes them 7 days to then physically drive it down. With the electronic filing, it can be instantaneous.
So hopefully, if nothing else comes out of this, Mr. Hanna will understand the need to get in with the 21st century, and we can streamline that office and have it operate more efficiently.
Right.
So, next question: listening to Mr. Hanna speak at a recent candidate forum, it sounds to me like when he, as a DA, gets to decide what cases to prosecute, it's that not him being the judge and jury. Doesn't every case deserve to be tried if the evidence is there, of course? So what say you, Mr. Good, about the need for every case to be tried if the evidence is there?
I mean, there's always going to be a room for, plea. There's going to be a room for plea negotiation. So if you tried every single case that was ever brought through that has good evidence, you would never get through all the cases. There'd be just tremendous backlog. So that's where plea negotiation comes in. We think the case is worth this. It's either probation or it's a prison sentence. And then the defense attorney thinks it's worth something else. We can't agree on the same thing. Then it goes to trial. I do think, to this question, though, there are certain types of cases that just need to go to a jury, particularly a lot of death cases. I think juries need to hear I have a hard time putting a price or a number on somebody's life and saying, well, your kid is this type of kid, this thing happened over here, I'm going to ballpark this, and I think it's 20 years. I think this kid that killed your son, he should get 20 years. I think that's the best we're going to do. I don't like that. I mean, I've kind of toured the idea of all death cases maybe need to go to juries just to decide, let the community decide. On the flip side, when you put a number on something like that, you could very well be wrong, and the community says, no, it's a lower number. So I think there's definitely a good call for letting the community be more involved and not being afraid of the community to be involved on a jury to actually make a decision for themselves.
So here's a little bit of foreshadowing our next question. If and when Tim Good takes the position as DA, what is his first plan of action? What is his number one priority? This goes on to one of the questions I was going to ask later in the show. What is your short-term goals and your long-term kind of legacy-like goals if elected district attorney? So,
Okay.
So what is your number one priorities?
So, day one, getting started, I want to see the culture in the office change. I want to see there be more service focused. I want to see that we serve the community. And so I want to have victim coordinators to actually meet with victims. I want the ADAs to have a more of an outside the office view towards law enforcement and to the community at large. So I want to see that change. I want to see the relationship between law enforcement and the DE's office repaired. I've been recently endorsed by CLEAT, which is the biggest law enforcement political organization in Texas. And so they actually provide insurance for all law enforcement officers. And you don't get that kind of endorsement if you don't have everybody in Johnson County who's law enforcement calling on your behalf and saying, we think that Tim Good would be the best choice for this job. I can't call up there and talk to CLEAT. I'm not a legislator that they would say, hey, you may be somebody who could pass laws that could help police officers. So it's a very rare thing to actually be backed by CLEAT. And that simply happened, like I've been saying the whole time. The officers, you talk to them, they are not happy with the DA's office. And so they collectively, with one voice, called and got an amazing endorsement for me.
So it's great you bring that up about the individual officers. We've heard some high influential individuals endorsing Mr. Hanna,
Right.
But you're encouraging the average citizen of Johnson and Somerville counties to go out and speak to the street cop.
I am.
The local. So if you guys want to know who to support, and you're pro police and you're pro enforcement of crime, go out and speak to your local law enforcement officers, your local sergeants, your local lieutenants, your local patrol officers. Ask them what can be improved with the district attorney's office, and if Mr. Good would be an improvement. That's a great way to do that. And the way I understand CLEAT is it's more of the overwhelming majority of officers have to want that to get that endorsement. Is that correct?
Okay. Yes. And so also on that, Mr. Hanna's slogan is keep us safe. And the truth of the matter, the people who keep us safe is law enforcement. They're the ones out there doing the hard work. When I was a prosecutor before I got let go, I get to do the fun part of being in court, kind of the glory, the glamour, but it is the individual officer who keeps us safe. And so go ask them, the work they're doing to keep you safe is ultimately getting to the DA's office and actually resulting in them being safer.
Well, and they're out on the front lines, and I mean, they're running to the gunfire, unfortunately, when need to
Right.
be. So, I mean, they have the most at risk in that. So their input and supporting them should be paramount with whoever sits in the DA's office. So part 2 of the last question.
Okay.
Also, what is your opinion on possibly reviewing any current or past cases that may have been looked over or dropped or not picked up due to negligence or the good old boy system in the current administrative decisions? Is it possible to revisit some of those, or is it once they're gone, they're gone?
No, that's actually going to be a big goal of mine. So there's still statute of limitations. So depending on the crime, most crimes are 3 years after the crime. The statute of limitations runs. Other crimes like fraud, there's 5. Some crimes like murder, there's no statute of limitations. Sexual assault, no statute of limitations. Absolutely, I want to go back and look at some of the cases, particularly ones I know I was involved in that were killed in the infancy of the case, that need to be revisited to determine, one, the investigations are never allowed to be done in those cases. And so I would like to go see those. But I'm sure my experience and my little slice of the pie, there's got to be a ton of other cases also that, because of either the good avoid system or negligence or whatever, need to be reviewed to make sure there's actual justice.
Mr. Bolin here, he talks about instituting the electronic filing system. You touched on that earlier. So the way I'm understanding this is what should be seamlessly instantaneous transfer of data so individuals can review it, add to it, develop the case. People are having to physically go from point A to point B. So somebody in Godly would have to drive from Godly down to the district attorney's office with actual physical files the way it's currently set up. And that can completely be streamlined with this new, is that correct? Am I understanding the question right?
So just imagine like this. Electronic is just simply could be like an email system that has all the encryption and can take a lot more data and have more attachments and actually kind of organize better than email can. Click send, other side receives it. The current way is more like a letter. You have to write out everything that's all on paper, and then you have to go deliver it somewhere. And that's how antiquated and different the two systems are. You've got one, like when's the last time you wrote a letter? You do that for, personal, reasons, or kind of be more intimate with somebody. But email, if you and I communicate, we've communicated before, text or email is what we do. But it's weird that we're having these cases that just get walked over and takes all that time and waste. And not to mention all the paper. And then at the office, the law says defense attorneys have to have electronic copies. So we have another person that their sole job is to scan all the information back in, which is already digital over here at the police department, scan it back in for the defense attorneys. But in the middle is the ADAs or the assistants. And we still have paper copies.
So hopefully that can get streamlined too. It just seems like a very inefficient way to do business in today's modern world. I remember in fighting the war on terror, and once we solved the bandwidth problem, everything got so much easier, and we could action so much more. So not even taking advantage of the bandwidth available just seems astronomically out of touch.
Well, the criminals are taking advantage of it, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're supposed to be one step ahead of the criminals, but we're actually way behind the times.
So next question, and I'm going to caveat this with a part 2 of this. So the question is, so let me ask the second part before you answer, but if elected, will you prosecute corrupt police officers and mayors? So at a recent event, Mr. Hanna says that there has been absolutely no public corruption for over 15 years.
I was there.
Now, there may not be public corruption. There may be public corruption. What I do know for a fact is there is a substantial amount of allegations of public corruption that have come across many desks. Part of the problem is some of the communication with the people that are bringing these allegations. Is it fair to say that first off, any mayor, any police officer, any elected official would be any allegations would be taken seriously by a Tim Good administration?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the people bringing these allegations have a right to some form of follow-up on what's going on with those? Now, without jeopardizing the case, obviously, how do you navigate that piece so people don't feel, because right now people feel like they're left hanging. How do you navigate that piece?
So yes, so there's gonna be a little difference between, like, it's harder for people to simply, you can't have a process where the average citizen walks the DA's office and say, I want to start a criminal case. But there are times, I even had this when I was working in the DA's office, when there's a large public outcry about an issue. So we had a school in Johnson County. There was allegations about a teacher inappropriately touching kids, and it was not being investigated. And the parents were all up in arms. This kind of get all over social media. And when we saw that, I called the school district, talked to them. I was like, what's going on? And of course, they had the whole, we took care of it internally. It's all taken care of. And I go, no, it's not taken care of, because that needs to be addressed through the proper channels. We need to get law enforcement involved. We need to have the children who've been allegedly inappropriately touched. They need to go down to the CAC and actually be forensically interviewed. That's basic investigation of these types of cases. You cannot step in and say this is not a big issue. So when you have a large public outcry, I think the DA's office has the ethical duty to look into those things, particularly because if the public's having an outcry and there's not an investigation, something has fallen. There's some kind of problem that's been created. Somebody's trying to cover something up.
So after the March 5th primary, as we get going into school board elections, we're going to be talking a lot about independent school district police departments. And you brought this up a little bit. There's a problem with ISD police departments, and that is you have a law enforcement entity that's answering to a bureaucrat, a school superintendent. And the superintendent has a lot of latitude and say in determining on how to classify things and make them reportable. What can a DA's office do to implore the superintendent to actually enforce the law as it's intended, not in what makes the superintendent look better and make the school district look safer than it truly is,
right? Because
those become reportable, and then it affects the reviews that these individuals get. So you brought up this school problem. Is there something that can be looked at in regards to that potentially from the DA's office?
Absolutely. So the DA's office, not only does it prosecute cases, but we have investigative authority. So the DA's office has the access to the grand jury. And so grand juries can do investigations and things like that. DA's office has its own investigators. Those are own licensed peace officers that work for the DA's office. So when there are situations where something is being covered up, the DA has the ability to also independently start its own investigations. Regarding the superintendents, there's not a whole lot of control over superintendents, but
no, they're a powerful entity. People don't realize it.
But the great thing is they're still under the law. So if there's something like, being covered up, somebody knows about it. If somebody wants to disclose that to the DA's office, and that's something we can look into, then there's something, there's options there.
Fair enough. So we got a couple minutes left here. We've asked some of the questions in here. One of the last ones is, do you feel that anybody has been publicly encouraged to not endorse you, that may endorse you? Do you feel that that's going on at all?
I mean, I think so. It's odd that everybody that's elected is all backing Mr. Hanna, right? I mean, that also kind of goes back to the good old boy thing. We all help each other out when, we want to keep the incumbent protection program. I'm going to endorse you and you're going to endorse me when I start time. I'm going to go back and forth. I'm sure there's a lot of people, because I've talked to some of these people and they said, I just had to do this. I have to make this endorsement. I'm not going to tell who those people are because they told me in confidence.
Sure.
But yeah, I think there's absolutely people who I was on very friendly terms up until I announced, who now I'm person non grata. That doesn't make sense. I mean, my character and our relationship didn't change. The filing, why does that change anything?
Politics should not get involved with enforcement of the law. It just really shouldn't. So we got about a minute, 30 seconds left here. What do you want to leave voters with on the biggest reason and why change is needed in Johnson County, and what they can expect right out of the gate from a Timothy Good administration?
Okay. So I think the most important thing is, my administration is, we're going to rebuild the relationship with law enforcement. I have a tremendous respect for the men and women who serve our community, and I am just sick of seeing them overlooked, not respected. I've seen them yelled at by the current district attorney. I've seen them belittled. I've seen their investigations been stopped in their tracks. I've seen individual investigations to high-profile people where the DA calls and says that person is off limits, you cannot do it, and their investigation dies. The change is also going to go with, like I said, there's not going to be any special people. There's not going to be. So it's not who you know or who you are. It's going to be the facts of the case. So the biggest thing out of the gate is going to be, I hope law enforcement and I can work together tremendously well. And I think that's going to simply just come together naturally, because they're going to have their handcuffs taken off where they can actually investigate cases and not be told who is special and who is not. Long term, my biggest goal, I would like to see an office that serves people, an office that doesn't have the allegations, because there's been this long allegation out there of Johnson County is corrupt. And I would like to see that when I leave office, that idea there no longer exists.
goodforda.com. Get out and vote in the March 5th primary. Tim Good, Texas Transparency Project. We'll see you next week with Dwayne Burns for Texas House 58.
Thank you, Greg.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet.